Hey friends, I think it's day 16 in self-isolation. It's been a journey, but keeping busy doing things. I hope y'all are doing all right out there. It's challenging, I know that, but keep positive and keep your hands active, keep your mind busy, and it'll help us all get through all this. So for me, I am actually inside because outside we are having a beautiful day. I mean, it's gorgeous, but it's almost too hot for March here in East Tennessee. So I was outside working earlier, and it was too much. So I'm inside the house enjoying the house is still kind of cool. So I am going to do some plying. I spun this up as a single the other day, and I put it on this little contraption here, and I'm going to use this as my method of plying. This is a handy Andean plying tool. It's a fancy way of saying just basically using your tail ends of your single. They knot together and then you ply it back on itself so you have no waste. The basic wood is this kind of a configuration here, and then it has a peg. You can't see it because it's all covered up by the yarn. There's a hole on the top and you put this peg in it. If you've ever seen anybody doing, they'll talk about using their hand. It's the same basic configuration, right? So they'll take their hand and then they'll wrap it over their middle finger. It goes around and then it goes over the other way. So you're having a loop that goes one way, another loop that goes another way. So they kind of almost come over each other, layered loops, if you will, in opposite directions. Theoretically, it's not supposed to get tangled, but it gets tangled. So what you're supposed to do when you ply, you have it on this little stand. I've never found this to be particularly helpful because it will get kind of snarled. Maybe it's just the kind of yarn I use, the fiber I use, I'm not real sure. But anyway, I have my two ends marked off here, but I'll show you real quick. Find the end that I had here. Okay, so basically all you're doing is you wrap around the back and around, and then over, down, around, and back. That's the whole thing until you basically have your entire yarn loaded onto this. And then I take my two ends, I tie them in a knot. And then when you're ready, you pull your pin here, and it kind of creates this funny looking configuration. This is kind of grabby wool, so it'll be interesting to see how this works. And you just kind of pulls it. I always hold it, I put it upside down and I hold it in my lap because, like I said, using that stand, I have never found it to be, it actually has the sides here, have two slits. Maybe you're supposed to put your yarn through that. I don't know. I've always found that to be, it kind of grabs it and it's a pain. So I just feel like I need to have it in my lap and have more control than like putting it on the floor and plying from there. I have my leader yarn, and what I do is that knot in my tail end, I just wrap it around several times. I don't like tying it onto my leader yarn because it's sort of a mess to get it off at the end. And then of course I am spinning in the opposite direction that I had spun the singles. All right, so as I'm plying, I'm doing kind of a long stretch just to make sure I get the amount of twist that I want in my my ply. What I'm doing with my right hand, because my left hand is what I'm using to lead, I'm kind of pulling from my my plying tool here, and I'm just sort of pulling it and giving it a little bit of tension, and then this stays basically static. I'm using this as like a guide to keep the singles separate until the last minute, and then they ply right here. But if you see, what's happening is all my singles are cording on themselves because I over plied the singles, which is sort of a habit of mine, good or bad, but when I'm plying and I go backwards, this was part of the reason why, is because I knew I was going to be putting a lot of tension on the singles as I'm pulling them through all this. So I needed to have it sort of overspun in the singles direction, so that when I plied it, I needed to make sure I put enough ply in it. And this is, this is pretty neutrally balanced yarn right here. It's not bunching up on itself like it's doing here in the singles. If it was over plied, it would do that. So let's get started with this and just let that be drawn in. And then I let the twist come up, and I let it come up a good way. I kind of can stop it and see, if that's about what I want, and then let it draw in, smoothing it out. Let some of the twist ride up the plied section, and then just do each new section. Like I said, if you're not sure, if you want to see what it looks like a little underplied or overplied, probably going underplied and then not, so that you don't have to go backwards on the overplying. But then that gives you an idea, just to make sure that you're doing it correctly. Ideally, you should be counting your treadles, so that you know how many that you've done. I'm bad for that. I just usually kind of do it by look and by feel. But that is basically the handy Andean plying tool. I find it to be particularly a good tool to have when you're doing a fairly decent amount of fiber. Like this is basically 2 ounces. So it's not a ton of fiber. I've done more than that, but it gets a little bit tricky, and it gets kind of overloaded. So something that's smaller, in my opinion anyway, tends to work best with this. All right, hope that was helpful for you, and remember, you are the gold.